Hi, good evening. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural Sports and Labor Organizing Conference. We're here tonight because workers around the country have been organizing at record levels. The organizing energy has ignited across the world of sports, including professional athletes, collegiate athletes, coaches, referees, and many other sports industry workers. We believe there's a lot to learn from these efforts, not just for the sports world, but for the broader labor movement too. Our goal with this webinar tonight is to bring people together who are doing work in sports organizing along with the broader community. Tonight, we'll have the privilege of hearing from leaders of the sports labor movement, including folks from basketball, figure skating, baseball, football, and rugby. This webinar is a collaboration between the UMass Amherst Labor Center and the Sports Solidarity Center. So my name is Jasmine Keresy, and I'm director of the UMass Amherst Labor Center. So let me tell you a little bit about the center. For nearly 60 years, our Labor Center has been doing critical work in the state of Massachusetts and the nation to support workers and workers' rights to organize and to act collectively. We do labor research, labor education, and community outreach. And we're also home to the nationally renowned Worker-Side Master's Program in Labor Studies, with over 1,000 graduates working in labor and labor-adjacent organizations worldwide. In fact, I know some of our alumni are here tonight, so hi, everyone. And the Sports Solidarity Center is the nonprofit educational arm of Sports Solidarity, an organization founded earlier this year to help athletes, coaches, officials, and other sports industry workers improve their lives through collective action. Harry Marino, the founding president of Sports Solidarity, is an attorney and former professional baseball player. Harry led the effort to unionize minor league baseball players and to win their first contract. First, as the executive director of the nonprofit called Advocates for Minor Leaguers, and later as an assistant general counsel at the Major League Baseball Players Association. So Harry will be moderating our panel discussion later this evening. This conference is made possible by many people, as you can probably imagine. I want to thank the panelists that are here today, and to Bob Cousy and his family, as well as the video team. I also want to extend a collective appreciation to the staff at Sports Solidarity Center and to Labor Center folks who made this conference go from a real distant idea to reality tonight. So here's the plan for the night. First, I'll pass it to Jerry Levinsky. Jerry wears many hats, including faculty at our Labor Center, where he teaches a wildly popular course called Sports, Labor, and Social Justice. Jerry has been a real visionary for this conference. We really wouldn't be here without him. Jerry will first introduce scholar and activist Bill Fletcher Jr., who will set the stage for how to think about sports and labor organizing and some of the context. And then Jerry will introduce remarks from the legendary basketball player and labor leader, Bob Cousy. In the second half of the event, Harry Marino, president of Sports Solidarity, will moderate a discussion with our 4 panelists. These panelists come from figure skating, baseball, football, and rugby. And we'll have time for questions at the end. And a few logistics. So you're welcome to write questions in the chat, and time dependent, we'll try to field those questions at the end. We're also recording this webinar, and so our plan is to send that recording to you after this event, and you're welcome to share it. Okay, finally, I know this webinar format can be hard because we're unable to see each other, but I do want you to know from the registration list, this is a really diverse group here. I see union members and non-union members, as well as athletes, students, alumni of the Labor Center, community members, union organizers, and other labor leaders. And so it's really exciting. So let's go. So Jerry Levinsky, I'll pass the baton to you.
Thank you, Jasmine. And I also want to thank everyone who worked on this project, including my UMass Labor Center colleague, Professor Claire Hammonds, Brandon Withers, David Foster, and the rest of the Sports Solidarity Center team, with a special shout out to my friend and union brother, Harry Marino, the president of the Sports Solidarity Center, who you will hear from later. You know, I'm struck by the fact that our gathering here is, as far as we know, the inaugural conference on labor organizing in sports. Inaugural both because all of us who have been involved in organizing this event hope this is the first of a regular convening on this subject going forward, but also because, as far as any of us can determine, it is the first such conference to take place on this important subject. In many ways, this is counterintuitive. In recent years, there's been an explosion of books and documentaries on sports. There is even a multi-volume encyclopedia, Philosophy of Sports. And yet, despite this level of interest in sports, there is very little attention given to sports as labor. That is, as a form of work engaged in by workers, and how those workers have both historically and at present responded to their material conditions. Ancient Greek society defined work as the negative and necessary consequence of the need for survival, not dependent on or an activity chosen by a free person, part of the domain of the animal body rather than of the free citizen. This is, of course, something we still struggle with. And that juxtaposition of work as a degraded activity compared to sports is particularly significant for us to think about given the still largely unaccounted for legacy of Curt Flood. After being traded to the Philadelphia Phillies against his will, Curt Flood sued Major League Baseball in 1970 over the reserve clause, a practice dating back to the 19th century in which professional players were literally owned by their clubs for their entire career. While the U.S. Supreme Court ruled against Flood, his union, the Major League Baseball Players Association, forced the reserve clause issue forward through its collective bargaining agreement, leading to a historic 1975 arbitration decision, rejecting the reserve clause and ushering in the modern era of free agency. Our focus today is to begin to center why and how labor organizing is important in sports, and why sports is a vitally important site of labor struggle. And we are very fortunate to have Bill Fletcher Jr. with us. Bill has authored a number of important books: The Indispensable Ally, Black Workers in the Formation of the Congress of Industrial Organizations, 1934 to 1941, Solidarity Divided, The Crisis in Organized Labor and a New Path Towards Social Justice, and They're Bankrupting Us, and 20 other myths about unions. Bill Fletcher Jr. has been active in the labor movement his entire life. He has worked for several unions in addition to serving as a director of education for the National AFL-CIO. And of note for today's convening, Bill served in an important advisory role during the recent and historic organizing of the Minor League Players Association. 5,500 new union members, resulting from one of the largest successful campaigns in recent years. Finally, Bill currently serves on the board of the Sports Solidarity Center. On a personal note, I really appreciate Bill's refusal to reach overly simplistic conclusions about things that require much closer and disciplined examination. And I also deeply respect Bill as a stand-up person who says what he means and means what he says. Let's all unmute for a moment and welcome Bill Fletcher Jr. Bill,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Thank you so much for that, Jerry. And my thanks to you and Harry for inviting me to kick this program off. I grew up playing baseball, stickball, and touch football in the lots and streets of New York City. I bought baseball cards and the gum that came with them, like every other boy I knew. I was good, or at least so I thought, until I joined a Little League baseball team where I proved myself under the pressure of a formal game to be poor to mediocre. It was humiliating. But I still loved baseball until I didn't. I can't say when it happened, but sometime after the Mets won the pennant in '69, and certainly by about 1972, I had lost interest in baseball. For a number of years, I followed football, but it did not have the same ring for me that baseball always did. And while I played some street basketball in high school, I came to hate the attitude on the court of most basketball players I played with and against. For years, I went through what felt like an exile from sports. Then in 2000, I was flying to an executive council meeting of the National AFL-CIO. It was a Delta flight. I remember it clearly. And I opened their magazine. There was an article about Curt Flood, the magnificent and courageous St. Louis Cardinals outfielder who had died in 1997, and Jerry just mentioned him. The article was about his fight to end the reserve clause and gain rights for the players. The article jolted me. Of course, I knew who Curt Flood had been, but as with much of my approach towards sports, I had forgotten the details. I had watched the Ken Burns documentary on baseball, which I loved and still do, but it did not all come together until I read that particular article. Reminding me about Curt Flood reminded me of the importance of baseball. And reminding me of the importance of baseball meant coming to grips with this being an institution and an industry within a capitalist economy. From the standpoint of the fan, sports are about action, winning, and losing. It's about competition. From the standpoint of the owners, it's about money, even if getting more money means owning a losing team. From the standpoint of the player, at the end of the day, it's a job, maybe a career, even if they love it. But for most athletes, a career that lasts for only a few years at best. While there are exceptional players who have long tenure, most don't. And so many athletes, upon receiving more money than they have ever imagined, assume it will go on forever, only to discover that injury and or age will inevitably sideline them at some point. But the other thing that will sideline them is owner greed. The story of Curt Flood was a story about struggle and determination. Despite the odds being against him and the situation being grim, Flood was prepared to struggle, but in struggling, he had the backing of the newly renovated Major League Baseball Players Association. And while Flood's legal challenge, as Jerry mentioned, failed, he set in motion a series of events that laid the foundation for the brilliant strategy of MLBPA Executive Director Marvin Miller to prevail, thereby derailing the reserve clause and opening the door to free agency. Thus, from the standpoint of the player, sports as an industry is about struggle. The question is always, however, whether the individual athlete believes that she or he can succeed on their own, whether against other teams or against the owners, or whether they recognize that only through organization and collective action can they win. In that sense, athletes are no different than any other worker who in this society are led to believe that there is something called merit, only to discover that in the absence of collective action and organization, there is only favoritism and ownership greed. I saw in baseball not only a story about owner versus athlete worker, but the attitude of the industry toward the rest of society. For Black America, by way of example, baseball was at one point central to the culture and economy of my people. Major League Baseball excluded the Black player until 1947, after which it opened its doors, and also raided the Negro Leagues for some of the best players in baseball. Rather than a principled merger of the Major League Baseball and Negro Leagues, we witnessed a process of poaching. Suddenly, there were these exceptional players in Major League Baseball, and much of US society had no idea from whence they came. But Major League Baseball, like other capitalist institutions, decided they wanted to get additional players and pay them even less than they were paying white and African American players. They turned to Latin America, the Caribbean, and eventually Asia. And while baseball has always been an international sport, by the 1970s, it was operating within a system of global capitalist fundamentalism, otherwise known as neoliberal globalization. Major League Baseball was not interested in investing in African American players. In fact, it was not interested in investing in the poor in the United States. Instead, they sought out vulnerable and exceedingly poor players financially poor, in other parts of the world, much like other industries have done, seeking to increase the profits for the owners, presenting themselves as encouraging players from around the world to succeed. What the MLB has done has been to dispose of entire populations, made the sport less and less affordable to fans, and deceive player into believing they can all be Otamis, when most don't make it out of the minor leagues. It's not just baseball. All sports are being affected by globalization, and it is only through organization that athletes can ensure that all players, whether originally from the United States or from some other land, are treated with dignity and respect and not be a source of competition except on the playing field. It is this which we must all keep in mind. The competition must be on the playing field, on the skating rink, on the basketball court, at the tennis match, on the racing course, etc., and not in the off hours between individual players, each fighting to make a living and to entertain and engross the fans. In the absence of organization and collective action, all that remains is gladiatorial battle to the satisfaction of the spectators and owners and the elimination of one champion athlete after another. It is this recognition that brings us together this evening and why we should look at the organization of athletes as another front in the struggle for worker justice. It is neither a sideshow nor a cute pastime. It is a battle to reshape an entire industry, thereby calling into question the myths that surround sports and reminding us of those who have stood up for themselves and for their fellow athletes, regardless of the consequences, for so many years. Our slogan can never be Ave Imperator Morituri Te Sulatan, otherwise translated as Hail Emperor, those who are about to die salute you. Our slogan must always be, an injury to one is an injury to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Folks, it's not often that one gets to meet someone famous who impacted their life from an early age. But such was the case for me when I had the opportunity recently to speak with Bob Cousy at his home in Worcester. As a 10-year-old growing up in Springfield, Massachusetts, my height growth caught the attention of some semi-pro basketball players whose sons were my pals. And although I did not come from a family of athletes, they took me under their wing and taught me a game that has provided great joy throughout my life. At that time, the name Bob Cousy and basketball were synonymous, known by names like the Houdini of the hardcourt, and even more to the point, Mr. Basketball. Cousy was the model player many aspired to become. You'll see more about Bob's accomplishments in the video shortly, but suffice to say they are too numerous to mention in a brief statement. What is significant for us today is that among the achievements of Bob Cousy, there is one that up until now has received relatively little attention. He was the founding president in 1954 of the union that represents the players of the National Basketball Association. I want to personally thank Worcester City Councilor and SEIU Local 509 leader Christian King for putting me in contact with the Cousy family, and I especially want to thank Bob's daughter Tisha Cousy, who was gracious and welcoming of me and the film crew into the family home. Finally, I want to thank the crew who worked very hard to edit an almost 2-hour interview with Mr. Cousy down for our use today. In particular, I want to thank Josh Stoll of the Sports Solidarity Center. It is with much appreciation that we invite you to join Bob Cousy as he reflects on his life's work. Thank you.
Cousy makes it. Well, Cousy with a great hand tonight has 16 points. Missed the basketball, Bob Cousy, with 16 points here in this first half of play. 66-50. The Celtics lead by 16.
I've indicated how pleased I am to finally, at 96 years old, be acknowledged for something that I hadn't thought about a lot over the years. But anyway, thank you. I appreciate this. I've been a very lucky and happy camper all my life. I've said many times I'm the luckiest SOB on the planet. So to be acknowledged in this way by something I'm very proud of at this point in my life, I'm very pleased. Well, 54, let's say, when this occurred. And the reality was we the players, and it weren't only, we're talking about 100 guys, I think. I think there were 6 teams at that time. Couldn't have been more than 15 on a team, 12. So we weren't dealing with a lot of people. And our issues were, we simply needed a seat at the table. And I said earlier, however, there were enough considerations for meal money. We were getting $5 a day. Even in the 50s, it was tough to eat 3 meals on $5. Travel conditions, not the conditions, but we'd all get off. This is before a lot of plane travel. We were doing DC-3s and occasional bus, but normally, we'd do the DC-3 thing. But then you get into the cities, 12 guys jump in cabs, take 3 cabs, and things. Arnold Albach, my dear friend and coach, was a tough monitor. So we were expected to pay our own transportation. It wasn't a case of getting paid per diem or stuff. I don't remember how they compensated us, but anyway, they needed an upgraded system. The big thing, I think, was we used to play 23 exhibition games. These are pre-games. These guys played 2, I think, if that. But anyway, we used to play 23 before the season began. That's a full college schedule. As you got older, this played a role, obviously, in your career. So that kind of stuff needed discussion. I was the only one in the league in the 50s putting asses in the seats. And not a lot, but enough to be a significant factor in an owner's income. I would guess I was putting 2,000 or 3,000 people. We were only drawing 5 or 6. So I was the only one they couldn't retaliate against. And they would have. They weren't choir boys, as I said. I simply feel that we the players need representation. We need a seat at the table, and I'm going to start the Players Association, something constructive to help the players. I'm sure it happened at the All-Star game, because the All-Star game played a role in everything we did. That's how, if you made the All-Star team, on your team, you were the player rep from that team, automatically. Because we couldn't go to Monaco for our team meetings. We met once a year at the All-Star game for that reason. At the All-Star game, we'd have a meeting or two and be together for 3 days in a relaxed atmosphere, and we'd be able to coexist in terms of issues of mutual interest. But other than establishing something that was tangible and a unit, and that the owners had to acknowledge was there. Really, as I said at the outset, I'm a happy camper. I'm pleased to be acknowledged for this because it's basketball related, but it's not.
All right. I think waiting for a couple other of the panelists to pop up on the screen here. Hi, everyone. I'm Harry Marino, the president of Sports Solidarity. At first, I just want to say I'm so appreciative of everyone who's in attendance here tonight, and especially of my friend Bill Fletcher and Bob Cousy for agreeing to be a part of this program, and really for providing some essential context about the history of sports labor, because it's a fascinating and really important history that so many people who consume sports today don't know. But I'm now excited to move to the panel portion of the program because there is really important organizing happening across the sports industry right now, including especially by more vulnerable workers whose issues and concerns really more closely approximate the issues and concerns affecting workers in other industries. So our four panelists tonight are representative of this exciting new organizing happening in sports, and I consider myself fortunate to know all of them. My goal for the panel is really to just get out of the way and let these folks share their interesting stories and perspectives. So, without further ado, I will introduce the panel. First, we have Chris Mattina. Chris is a recently retired professional rugby player who spent 8 years in Major League Rugby, also played on the U.S. national team. He's the president of the Major League Rugby Players Association Player Board, and he is preparing to lead the rugby players into their first ever collective bargaining negotiations next summer. Next, we have Amy Engler. Amy has taught figure skating at Chelsea Piers in New York City since 1995. She helped organize her fellow figure skating coaches into the NYC Coaches Collective last year. The struggle of the Coaches Collective was profiled earlier this year in the New York Times. Despite some setbacks, they continue their fight for recognition as we speak. We also have with us tonight Kenneth Farrow. Kenneth played professional football for 7 seasons, including 4 in the NFL with the Dolphins, Patriots, and Chargers. He's the founding president of the United Football Players Association, which organized spring football. In addition to continuing to assist professional football players, Kenneth is also helping to organize other athletes at Sports Solidarity. And finally, we have with us Angel Basabe. Angel is a recently retired baseball player who spent 5 years in the Pittsburgh Pirates minor league system. He was an active player leader throughout the minor league unionization effort and the negotiation of the first collective bargaining agreement. He played an instrumental role in representing the interests of Latin American players who make up roughly 40% of the minor leagues, but whose interests have long been entirely overlooked by Major League Baseball. So the plan for the panel is really pretty simple. I have 4 big questions I want to pose. My plan is basically to just pose the question and then give each of the panelists a couple of minutes to answer that question in turn before moving on to the second question, and so on and so forth. If anyone in the audience has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll use any time we have remaining at the end to hopefully get to a few of those questions. So with that, we'll jump in. And the first question, which I think is important for grounding the rest of the conversation, is a simple one, which is, when did your group decide to organize, and what issues were you trying to address. And I'll go in the order of the introductions. So we'll start with Chris.
Thanks, Harry. I'm glad to be here. And thanks everyone for coming out. So we decided to organize the USA Rugby Players in 2017. We represent all 4 groups and national teams, men's and women's. And we decided to start organizing Major League Rugby in 2022, in 2023, and we were actually recognized earlier this year in 2024 by the league through voluntary recognition. Some of the main issues we were trying to address, especially with the USA, was our working conditions and travel. There's a lot of travel with the national team, and it wasn't up to par. So that was a main reason for them, and also our pay. It hasn't gone up in a long time, so that's kind of something that we're fighting for. The last bit for the USA players is just insurance. We're all independent contractors, so we're really trying to work hard to get change there. In terms of the Major League Rugby players, main things were contract security. Players can get cut at any time. There was payments that weren't being made by owners. They've controlled the player movement and contracts pay. Minimum salaries haven't gone up since we've started. And then the last piece around our contract security was the folding of 3 teams, and players were owed money, and the league kind of turned their back on them. So there was some really big issues which really led to the organizing of our group by our players, and we have a lot of support from them. The last bit is just mostly around safety. Rugby is a really tough game. A lot of injuries happen. In 2022, we led a concussion protocol implementation, which didn't exist, and got that passed. And now we have an HIA, which is a head injury assessment, which is done around the world, but was never done in our league, and we got that passed. For our medical insurance, we go through workers' comp, which has a whole host of issues, which we're trying to solve. And then, I think the last thing, I guess, is more of a recent thing, but they just released our schedule, which included midweek games, which is 2 to 3 days rest in between games. And if anyone has seen a rugby match, that's pretty impossible to do. So those are some of the main issues and why we started to organize.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Amy, you want to take this question next?
Sure. So I am one of about 60 figure skating coaches at Chelsea Piers in New York, which has been open since 1995. And we felt incredibly frustrated in the summer of 2023 when we had come out of the pandemic and business was back, but yet they were the management was putting the squeeze on us. They had given us a pay cut over the summer of $25 an hour. And then they increased our commissions that we were going to pay for our private lessons that we teach, that we make most of our money. That was going to raise by 25 and then 50% over 2 years. So they were making it very difficult for us to make it a sustainable career. So we had also some safety concerns. They had not listened to our complaints that our locker rooms were not safe sport compliant. And we were in the locker room with children, and children would dress near us, and that is really not okay with safe sport. And we're all very supportive of safe sport. We want to get all kinds of abuse out of all the Olympic sports. So it really frustrated us that our management did not respond to that. So in the summer of 2023, we signed a letter, 38 of us, which was like about 75% of the coaches, signed a letter that announced that we had formed the New York City Coaches Collective, and we asked to go to collective bargaining. And we still are waiting to go to collective bargaining. They really pushed back on us hard. Those were issues at the beginning.
Thanks, Amy, and excited to hear about some of those challenges and kind of what the future holds for you all as we move forward. Kenneth, you want to jump in on this question next?
Yeah, thank you, Harry. Thank you, everybody. I'll keep it quick. After 7 weeks of playing in the Alliance of American Football League, who managed to land TV deals with the NFL Network and major local channels in 2019, we were all suddenly kind of left stranded after being kicked out of our living arrangements with less than 12 hours notice, forced to find our own ways back home, guys obviously living all across the country. And then we were sent medical bills that we thought were taken care of by the league. However, that didn't kill the love of the game for anybody. And the very next year, we all decided to join the second coming of the XFL in 2020. And after being initially informed of 100K plus salaries, that all drastically changed to $27,000 base for the year with a $2,000 win bonus upon arrival at training camp. And then we were shut down by COVID after 5 weeks. And so all of that was a lot in itself, but I think one of the last straws for us was when I suggested to our GM that we have a team meeting with our head coach to just adjust some of our offensive strategies to better position us to win games. One of the remarks that I was met with was that in the group of players that I wanted to meet with the head coach with, that there be white players present, and it was honestly shocking to me. Growing up biracial in the South is something that I've kind of spent a lifetime of balancing and dealing with. And in that moment, I knew that it would be very uncomfortable for me to move forward with my life and not shed some light and bring some type of solutions to not all that we faced in those 2 years, but to make sure that that specific experience is never duplicated again moving forward. It absolutely has, no place in the world of sports, which is a place where is completely opposite of that, where you have so many cultures coming together and all those barriers are broken down. And that was kind of the genesis of kind of getting everything started and being able to officially be elected as the official players union for the spring league this year. And that was the start of kind of how everything began for us.
Awesome. Thank you, Kenneth. And Angel, you want to take this question?
Well, sure. Basically, everything started in 2020 after the pandemic year, and they released the MLB teams. They released about 1,000 players in 2020 because they were cutting some leagues, and their excuse was that there were not enough spots available, and most of those players were injured. Most of those players were not 100% able to play on the field. And the next year, we have to do something about it. And basically, we came to an agreement that that shouldn't happen again because that sucks. That the only way you provide money to your family is playing baseball, and you're not able to play baseball because you're hurt, and then you're hurt, and they fire you. So basically, we came to a point where we had to do something, and we have the power to do something about it. And when we realized that we actually have the power to do something about it, and you can do it, we change the mentality. And that's basically how everything started.
Thanks, Angel. So really appreciate all of those answers. And I think for, folks in the audience, what immediately emerges to me off of those answers is how those issues are so far removed from some of the narrative and dialogue around Major League Baseball players or NFL players and some of the issues they in 2024 are in a position to fight about. And so really appreciate that. So the second question I'll ask is, obviously, all of you decided to organize because you had real issues that you were looking to address. But as we all know, organizing is really hard in the sports context, just as everywhere else. So the next question I want to ask is really what were or are, depending on where your situation is at this point, the biggest challenges you faced in your organizing effort. And I'm particularly interested given that these are not high profile groups that you all have organized, whether funding for the organizing effort was a concern, and if so, how you address that concern. And so here, why don't we start with Amy and then Kenneth, then Angel, and then Chris.
I'd say The issues we had with organizing came from the pushback we got from the company, which was pretty fierce and pretty immediate, and it continues now today. About 20 of the 37 coaches who signed our letter creating the collective have been terminated, which means they're not allowed to teach any group classes or any of the programming. They can still teach their own private lessons there. So that's a lot of pushback. And so it was easy for people to say, I love this job, I love teaching, I love my sport. I can accept a little bit of mistreatment and maybe a little bit lower pay sometimes, just to keep the job that I have. So loving our sport and loving our job became kind of a drawback to the organizing.
Kenneth, you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for us, which was a unique situation because COVID shutting the leagues down and then literally having no league to unionize under, we faced a kind of unique kind of like blank space in the situation where there was a bunch of bankruptcy situations, there was a bunch of medical situations where it was truly just having to nail down the outreach to make sure guys were informed about things, but also wondering when is the next chance going to come up for us to even be able to organize and what league is that going to be under. And I think when that league emerged in the 2022 USFL, it was all the way out in Birmingham where, we weren't too sure how we were going to accomplish it. But it was just the consistent effort of being able to really gather everybody and kind of galvanize everybody throughout the issues that we had faced in the previous years. And I think those issues lingered on because of just the nature of them. And that's something that kind of carried us through. But it was 3 years of just nailing away emails, nailing away phone calls. And yeah, there wasn't, a penny put into anything. Everything was kind of out of our own pockets. So that was really a passion project to be able to get it off the ground. And I think that the threat of being able to step up and do something to that extent of having a players union and having players feel like, is this going to be a threat to the dream of playing at the highest level? And also just the weight that, playing at the professional level, that is a big, kind of carrot, if you will, for guys to be able to like more so stay in line and not rock the boat. It's something that we had to consistently like educate players on. It's if we come together collectively, there is strength in that. There will be pushback, but being able to set the precedent for not only us right now, but for future generations coming behind us was something that I think ultimately we were able to convey. And obviously it's landed us where we are today, but it was definitely a task because that dream of playing at the highest level is so big for every sport across the board.
Thanks, Kenneth. Angel, you want to go next on this question?
For sure. So basically, when we all want something different and we have to accept that what was the best for the majority of the people, regardless of if you like it or if you're not. So basically, we have to look for the good in common. Sometimes when you're looking for something, you gotta leave your self-interest aside. Instead of look for which one, you have to look for what the majority or what's the best for the majority of the people. And another part that was very difficult was starting last year when we were reaching our limit date and we were not close to an agreement. And it was hard because I was talking to the American players and to the Latin American player. If we don't have an agreement, we're not gonna show up. We're not gonna go practice. So we're gonna tell them like, hey, we need to go. We need an agreement if you want us to keep working. And that was very tough because a lot of players, they were afraid, all right, what if I don't show up and I get problems? And that's gonna happen. If you're in a union, you gotta play as one. If you're in a union and one people work in one side and the other in another side, whoever gotta give you the order, they don't really know if you're a union. So the hardest part between all these was all of the people, it doesn't matter how many of you are, they gotta stay as unit. That's the best you can do.
Thanks, Angel. Chris, you want to take this one?
Yeah. The biggest challenge was the league last year fought against us when we were trying to organize. So last year in 2023, when we wanted voluntary recognition, the league started holding capture meetings for each one of the teams. They held workshops for management, coaches, GMs, basically feeding them false information that this is a bad idea. So it would go down to the players. The coaches were trying to get in the coaches were trying to get in the players' ears. The GMs would basically sit us all down and say, you know, you're going to bankrupt the league. This is terrible for us. You know, kind of spreading all this false information. And it was up to myself and a lot of the other guys that are working for us to combat that information. A lot of players were scared. A lot of people didn't know, you know, what if we're doing the right thing, and if this was a good idea. So you know, it was honestly a massive challenge for us, but we were lucky that, you know, we had a really good strategy. We stayed together, kind of like Angel said, we all stayed on the right side. We had over 90% of the players stuck with us, and supported us. And I think that was just, it was a huge challenge for us, but we overcame it with a lot of support. Um, and then just to kind of talk about the funding, yeah, it was a big issue for us. We were lucky that we had met with a lot of the PAs and executive directors, and they kind of helped us out with a little bit of funding just to get us through this fight with the league. Um, you know, but I think now, and they funded a campaign called Rugby Union Now. And then obviously we got voluntary recognition in January. So that was a huge, you know, challenge, but we really had the help of other unions to get us through it.
Thanks, Chris. So many interesting elements, I think, to those answers. And what I'm struck by is the way that a lot of what you four said is really very common across the labor movement more generally, and you know, beyond sports, right? So challenges keeping the group unified, employer opposition, these things are nothing new. Also, kind of struck by a couple of ways that it's different maybe than in other parts of the labor movement. So this idea of the passion and the dream job being used against folks when they're trying to organize or creating a challenge. Definitely saw that in baseball, and also the some of the challenges around, you know, funding in an area where there's not really an established union that's necessarily an obvious home, right, for some of these groups. So appreciate those answers. So the next question I want to ask goes to really, you know, we've talked about kind of what the issues were and what some of the challenges were, but I also know that, you know, you all have accomplished at least something and you know, varying things through these organizing efforts. So I'd love to hear what your group has achieved because of organizing and what you're looking to achieve moving forward. Um, and you want to start here, Kenneth? Go first on this one.
Yep. So I think the biggest things for us was obviously moving from not having a union at all to having a union is obviously step number one for us, to establish a real voice at the table. One of the biggest things for our guys was the fact that in these leagues, they are only covering the span of 4 months. And so one of the biggest burdens on a lot of our players were the fact that they had families, they had homes, they had leases that were already signed, and then having to go to a random city and try to find living. And sometimes guys were paying you almost 2.5 times what they would normally be paying just to house themselves and their families. And so that was the biggest accomplishment for us from the 22 to 2023 season, where guys were paying $100 a night at a hotel to being able to put in a $1,600 living stipend in 2023. And then so that was huge part for us. And then the medical side of things, being able to make sure that guys were not cut while injured or were not being able or were able to receive some type of compensation, even though they were injured during the season, to be able to sustain what they projected out to be making for the next 4 or 5 months was big for us to be able to get some type of compensation after injury. Those were our two biggest things. And then I think moving forward, as we go into our 2024 or 2025 season and are about to start bargaining, the biggest thing that we are looking to accomplish moving forward is, making sure that these guys have health insurance year round. That was a huge, huge hit to everybody last year when health insurance got cut off. So that is something that will definitely be right up there with housing and one of some of our biggest achievements once we're able to accomplish that this year.
Terrific. Thanks, Kenneth. Angel, you want to go next on this one?
Oh, sure. So I want to start too. The most important thing that we got was the union. It doesn't matter if you're Asian player, European player, Latin player, American player. We all want something good. We all want something to happen. I think the best thing that could happen to us was just the union. Everything came together as a family to find a solution, and thanks God we did. And regarding to the benefits, we got housing. I have friends of mine that before I played high levels, they were sleeping 6, 7, 8 people in the same house just because of housing. That was one of the most important part that we negotiate. Another part that was very important was now we are getting paid in the off season. As my friend said, we have friends that have families, they have daughters, they have wives, and during the season, there are athletes, they are their hometown all-star, and once the season ends up, they gotta look for another job because they're not able to provide money for their families because they were not getting paid during the off season, and that's actually pretty good. Now we're getting paid more during the season, and now we get some money during the off season. That's pretty good to provide for the family. And if you are very comfortable, you're by yourself, you can use that money for your workouts and to prepare for the next season. That's really pretty good. And the third most important thing for me, now if you're hurt, they are not gonna be able to release you. And if they did, they're gonna pay you for your recovery, which is pretty good. I have a bunch of friends that once they get hurt, they were get rid of them, which sucked because that's the worst thing that could happen to a player. If you were a player, that's the worst thing that you wanted to happen to you. And just by the fact that you were released getting hurt, that's actually pretty bad. So now we make sure that even if they do, they have to cover all your medical bills up to 2 years, and that's actually pretty good.
Thanks, Angel. Chris, you want to go next on this one?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that we achieved, obviously, was the recognition this January in 2024. I think another thing that I'm really proud of, there was a situation this year with a team that folded. And like I said in the past, the teams that fold, the league kind of had turned the other cheek and didn't make the guys whole, pay off payments, help them with rent. Guys were left in the lurch with medical bills in the past. And this year, a team folded, and we kind of drew a line in the sand, and we said it's not going to happen this time. So, I was on the phone with the commissioners of the league while I was still playing, while I was in training camp, basically saying, if you don't take care of this, we're going to go public, and we're going to, essentially make it everyone's business and make it your business. And for the first time ever, the league paid those payments that normally were through the owners through their own payroll, and all the players were made whole. So that was a huge win for us, and it wouldn't have happened without the Players Association, and like the other times before. The other thing I'm really proud of is I think we started our first player development program with continuing education and career transition partners. It's something that I think is in need for rugby players. We don't make enough in terms of salary. A lot of guys work other jobs and doing dual careers. So, to have something for the first time that's going to develop the players on and off the field and after their careers are done was a massive priority for me and for the association. And to get something started was really awesome. The last thing that we're kind of looking forward to achieving is obviously our first CBA come August. It'll be the first ever CBA in rugby history in America. So we're really looking forward to that and making sure we do that well, and getting another, setting ourselves up for the next 7 years, 10 to 7 years.
That's awesome. Thanks, Chris. And Amy.
Okay. We've had some victories after we organized. We got some raises. Our summer camp pay is up. Our pay for other classes throughout the year was also raised. We won a locker room. We now have a locker room away from the children, which is really great. And from the article in the New York Times, which was really mostly about our retaliation and didn't really talk a lot about our dreams of having a seat at the table and talking about our sport and helping management to see the best way that we can help our athletes and our clients to continue to skate and love the facility. That earned us a lot of support in the community, and within our sport too. So that's all really positive. And I think as time goes by, my coworkers are getting more comfortable with the idea that staying together and being together is a good idea. That good things are not happening when we split apart. So hoping for the best.
Thanks, Amy. And I just want to say, congratulations to all of you, honestly, on, seeing these issues in your workplace, facing these obstacles that you spoke about, and then achieving tangible, measurable improvements for your coworkers. It's really, it's pretty awesome to hear about. Really, the fourth question, and well, before I get into the fourth question, let me just say for folks in the audience, I know we've gotten some questions already. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat now, or as we wrap up this fourth question here. So the fourth question I have for all of you is a little bit more of a personal one that I'm interested in, which is why did you decide to get involved in organizing your workplace? And if you're passionate about union organizing now, but weren't before you started the process, kind of what changed, what led to that new perspective on this issue that brought you to this panel here tonight? So on this one, why don't Angel, why don't you go first, and we'll go around from there.
Oh, sure. So basically, when I realized that I have the power to change thousands of minor leaguers' lives, I was hearing about the CBA agreement that it was coming out, and by that time I didn't know what it was. The only thing that I know that it was gonna help 1,000 of minor league players, and when I was really getting into it, is when I realized that me by myself, I'm not gonna do anything, to be honest. But when you collect a lot of people and we came together to find a solution, that's when we have the power. As I said before, the best thing that you can have in an organization, the best thing that you can have is the union. And when you look united as a team to these big corporations, to this big organization, they don't like that. I mean, they like their player be one in one side, another in the other side. But when you as a team came together and show up there, they are afraid of you, because yeah, they have a lot of money, they have everything, but at the end of the day, you're the worker, you're the one making money for them. So if all of you came together as a union and proposed something, I'm pretty sure that you're gonna get to an agreement. Probably it's not gonna be 100% what you want. Probably it's not gonna be 100% what you deserve, but you're gonna get you're gonna be better than where you were. For example, right now in the minor league, we improved a lot of bunch of stuff, but from my opinion, there's a lot of stuff too that it needs to be done. But we start from something. So in the next agreement, we're gonna be improving a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and we're gonna get to a point where they give us. what we deserve.
Thanks, Angel. Chris, you want to go next?
Yeah. As a player, like Angel, I just saw the need for it. Personally, I'd been through so many different things with the league. Whether they were holding on to my rights and I wanted to go somewhere else, whether I was being basically forced to take a minimum contract, which was not a livable wage. And then just kind of seeing what my teammates were going through. From across the league through folding teams, through my teammates, through American guys, through foreign guys, and just hearing their stories and understanding their issues. I was just like, this can't be right. And I think I love this game so much, and why are they hurting the game like this? And I just knew that I had to do something, and that we could do something. And once we started to organize, I really realized like we need this, and this is going to be the best thing for us. For our legacy, but also just right now in terms of getting things done for the players. Kind of something that I guess sparked me a little bit more is funny. During 2020, I was trying to figure out what was going on, and I messaged DeMaurice Smith on LinkedIn from the NFLPA, and I just messaged him. And I was like, "Hey, can we chat?" And he sent me his number, and we talked on the phone probably for like an hour. And I think after that call, it galvanized me, and it really showed me like this is when we can get this done and we can get a CBA and we can fight together, we can really move mountains and we can change how they're doing things. And his words and how he has been throughout his whole career, but with me then was a really amazing moment for myself and really just put me on this trajectory as we've come this far. Yeah.
It's terrific. Amy?
Um, I just hate to see people mistreated, and that's always, especially myself too. That's always motivated me, and I feel really grateful to be in this group with all these workers who have fought for their rights. I'm inspired by the rugby players. I had wonderful conversations with sheet metal workers in Pennsylvania during the election. And in the past, I would have thought didn't really have much in common. Figure skating coaches wouldn't have much in common with sheet metal workers, but they were really great, and they were encouraging and are willing to help us out if we need help in the future. So I really am glad to be part of this community of to fight for workers' rights.
Kenneth, you want to do this one?
Yep. I think for me personally, I had some injuries to start my NFL career with a broke shoulder blade that got misdiagnosed with a labrum, and I had to get a second opinion to get the right surgery done, and then ankle surgery that almost got misdiagnosed for kind of a 3-week injury settlement. So I had some early issues in my professional career that I was kind of unaware of the I guess tools that I had through the union. And it wasn't until I got into the spring league of football and didn't have a union and really realized like, whoa, you know what I mean? We need to make sure that we have this entity behind us. And this is something that needs to be set up. And I think a unique situation that we got put in as football players was the fact that we went from the glitz and glam of the NFL and high profile and big contracts to making a $50,000 salary for the year and being really brought back down to reality and what real life was. And I think in that, I became even more passionate for the labor movement as a whole, realizing that there is so much collective power that can be formed, not only for us as sports players, but for everybody across the country. And I think that is something that has been highlighted to me across all industries, is that there is mistreatment, gross mistreatment amongst all industries to so many Americans in this country. And I am super, super passionate about what we can do with the platform that we are in, being that it is sports and entertainment, and how there is such a strong gravitational pull from the masses to sports. I think being able to really prop this up in a way that shows the rest of the country that, hey, it doesn't matter where you're at. The collective power is the collective power when you're trying to accomplish something. And so hopefully this can be a real vehicle and a tool that we can all collectively begin to orchestrate and use for the rest of the country to realize, especially facing the things that we're facing right now with the current state of affairs. Hopefully we can use this as kind of as like a beacon for the rest of the country to be able to usher this kind of new revamped view and perspective of what a union can do for just your everyday American person here in the country.
Terrific, terrific sort of last answer there, Kenneth. And really want to say, just before we get to the questions and answers, thank you so much for those thoughtful answers, and really for all the work, inspiring work that all four of you have done. Really honored that you decided to come be a part of this, and appreciative of all the work that you're doing. And thanks to people for putting questions in the chat. First, there's a logistical question that I can answer, which is I think I can answer, although when I hand it off to Jasmine to close us out, she may correct me. But the question is, will there be a copy of the webinar, a recording? And I believe the answer to that is yes. So if you're, if you're watching this and you think, hey, this would be great, and there's other people that you have in mind that you'd like to share this with, we should be able to get that to you. There's a couple questions that I think are applicable to everyone that maybe I'll pose, and no pressure, but if you want to jump in on it, I'll just kind of let any of the panelists jump in. So one is, what resources did you use to start your organizing drive?
I would say the Google Sheets. No, but seriously, everything we could, from just a with no funding, just maximizing everything that was a free service to us, to be able to try to just collectively be as organized as possible. And so yeah, I know it sounds funny, but almost all of our time was spent on trying to maximize the utilization of Google Sheets to be organized and to be able to really get the ball rolling for us through that.
Yeah, like Kenneth said, with very limited resources and a little bit of help from some of the other associations, we were able to get our campaign shirts out, but a lot of it was just the groundwork of organizing, talking to teams, getting our player reps, our senior leaders to in a group chat, just to say, like, this is what we need to do, this is what they're saying, and it's not true, and you need to, a lot of just the groundwork, really, and it's just through the communication piece. That was probably our main thing last year as we were trying to combat this. Email, WhatsApp, group chats, just basically, getting everyone on the same page.
Okay, great. Angel, you want to go?
Yeah, I want to say something. I think when it comes to resources, it's kind of easy. I was contacted by Instagram. One of the reps of the Latin America community contacted me via Instagram, and that's how I was talking to basically all the players in the Pittsburgh Pirates organization. I look at the rosters and I look every single one of them. And hey, look it up Instagram, Facebook. Good thing we live in 2024, and you can reach them in Instagram, Facebook, whatever social media that you have. And from there, basically Zoom meetings. In Zoom meeting, we talk about the situation that we were living, what it needs to be improved, what's good, how do you feel about it. And that was the easiest part. The hardest part where it came to an agreement and came united as a team. So when it comes to resources, it's not that hard. If you really want it, you definitely will be able to to do it.
Okay. Great. I really appreciate that. And I think the thing I pull from that, and also from my own experience, is just the amount of work and self-teaching that goes into, athletes sort of learning how to be resourceful without a lot of money, and just figure out these things for themselves, which is pretty remarkable to watch. Another question here is, I think, an interesting one, which is, there's so much money in certain sports and very public debates about CBAs and athletes' demands, but how do you keep your athletes grounded in the reality of your sport, and really help them understand what you need to ask for now, what isn't reasonable for your league at this stage in your sport? Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think that's a very good point, and I think that is something that has to be raised up. But I think the fact that, well, one, I'll say that a lot of times I feel that a lot of the players, if the communication is there, a lot of the players fully understand what's going on. There's just always kind of a lack of communication of everybody getting on the same page. And so I don't think it's as hard of a task to keep them grounded as it is to keep the communication levels to where they need to be to keep everyone on the same page. All it takes is a couple kind of rogue comments in a group setting where some guys take something out of context and things become unrealistic. So I think just the communication component of organizing is what can alleviate some of those kind of strays where it's like, that's unrealistic, and making sure that, the topics and the things that are most important are the things that are being emphasized. And I think as long as the communication is there on those things, in our experience, in my experience, we haven't really had too many situations where guys are just, hell bent on trying to achieve something that is just unrealistic, because we've always kind of set the standards down from the beginning of like, hey, this is the reality we're facing, and this is what is realistic on what we can accomplish.
I think it's similar with us. I think just being transparent is the number one thing for us. You know, from where the league's coming from, I think we all know the realities of our sport, and it's still growing, and we're all trying to grow the game. So I think the players do understand they're not asking for things that are outrageous. They're really asking for the minimum standard. So I think there really isn't so much issue, but I do believe that transparency is key to that. Um, and yeah, I think um, it's more of a technical term, but going into a CBA, you do information requests from the league, and you do get a really good idea of what their financial situation looks like, what their policy situation looks like. So making sure you gather that information before you go into those negotiations, so that you can make, a fair, balanced deal that, doesn't do too much harm to the league, but also kind of creates those minimum standards, and you get what you believe is turning point for the players.
So basically, you gotta be very, very realistic about what you want and about what you can get. Of course, I want to get $10,000 per month. Is that realistic? Of course, it's not. So you have to see which ones are the top of your priorities. For example, you are professional players, but at the same time, 6 players are sleeping in the same house in a small 2-bedroom apartment. Of course, that's not possible. That's unrealistic. I mean, that's something that have to be changed. You as a union gotta come together and see what are the top of your priorities. And when you find out which one it is, that's the one that you have to fight for.
Awesome. Thanks. So I'm just looking at some of the questions here and trying to sort of um, connect some of them if possible. So I think one theme in some of the questions is, what can the broader labor movement and union members do to support the organizing of your groups and other groups across sports? Any thoughts on that one? And I'll say, I mean, I can say one thing right off the bat is I think the story that Chris told about D. Smith, it was an interesting one, right? In terms of somebody who's sharing their experience and just willing to, be a voice and an ear and have that conversation, the impact that had to then, lead to Chris turning around and really sort of galvanizing his group and organizing his group, I think is really powerful. So I would say, I mean, just to jump in with that answer, I think any one person, right, it shows the impact one person can have in terms of just providing some perspective and experience and advice to somebody who's new to this, who, as the folks on the panel have said, to kind of jump in and taking Google Sheets and Instagram and really teaching organizing to themselves, just that touch point with someone who's been a part of the labor movement for a long time can be very impactful. So that's just one thing I would say. But I don't know, Chris, I thought maybe you were going to say something, or maybe someone else on the panel wants to jump in on this one.
Yeah, I think amplifying messages of each one of our brother unions is a massive one for us. If NWSL or any of the people on this panel need an amplified message, like that's what gives us leverage, especially when we don't have resources, as some of the bigger unions. So I think, that's been the biggest thing. Like our leverage is our voice, and it's solidarity, not just within our group, but from other groups. And the more that we can apply pressure to the people that we're not going against, but the people that we're, trying to get things from, like that, I think has a huge part to play. And obviously I think the biggest one for all of us that we've seen is the fundraising piece, because, we're going to go into CBA negotiations with pretty much not a dime. So, how do you navigate that? It's obviously a difficult thing to do, but that I think amplifying, but also the fundraising piece is really important.
So I think we have time for a couple more. One is just a very specific question, Amy, to you that I just am seeing, which is when coaches were fired, were unfair labor practices complaints made to the NLRB?
Yes, three were filed in September for 3 terminations. The others have chosen not to follow that route. So yes.
Yes, but they're still pending at this point. Is that right?
Yes.
And then another question is I think an interesting one, especially as we think about sports solidarity and kind of our project, which is a question that says many support staff, front office staff, and coaching staff also work under precarious conditions. Is there potential to build solidarity between these workers and the athletes themselves?
Yeah, I think that is, I think that's something that is kind of could be a new dynamic. And I think especially at some of the levels that we're talking about playing at, whether it's the minors, whether it's the spring league of football, whether it's rugby, I think there is that's kind of something that maybe is untapped at the moment, and that I think we're exploring ourselves with assistant trainers and athletic trainers facing the same issues and situations that players face. And with the athletic trainers and the players being such a hand in hand kind of cooperative functions of the success of a league, that is something that we have really kind of embraced with like open arms and trying to see about how we can intertwine those two, because I feel that if you have your athletic trainers, if you have your assistant coaches and your players all on the same page under the same scope of a union, that almost puts everybody who is not the owner of the league across the table at bargaining. And obviously, we've talked, a lot about how strength in numbers, how solidarity, how unity is so powerful. And so that is something that we are currently going through with the UFPA, to where if we can amplify and raise over those voices of the assistant coaches, of the athletic trainers, and bring them to the table with us, that is something that I think could kind of set a new precedent in the sports world, and maybe one of the first times it's done where you see the athletic trainers, where you see the coaches, where you see the players all in solidarity. And as we all know, the goal is to keep everybody divided, and that would be the ultimate, I guess, collection of people in the industry that we're talking about, to be able to join the same team and really be able to make real moves on what needs to be minimum standards across the board in every facet of whatever sport that you're playing. Great question.
Thanks, Kenneth. And I would say, I would just add to that, that I think that's very much the concept behind sports solidarity, just at a high level, is that there is all kinds of opportunity for exactly what Kenneth said. And frankly, what we're seeing here today in terms of, Amy, a figure skating coach, a rugby player, a baseball player, a football player, but there's also coaches and refs and others who are interested in organizing, who we certainly see as a part of this movement. I'm going to address one. There's a theme to some of the other questions that I'll about college sports organizing. I want to answer really quick, and then there's one last question I'll give to the panel, and then we can kind of wrap. So there were a handful of different questions about college athlete organizing, some very specific, and questions about where the court cases are and different things about that. I would just say that college athlete organizing is definitely a part of this conversation at a high level, but it really kind of requires and necessitates its own entire thing, because it's such a complicated ecosystem. It's definitely something that I know a lot of folks are working on, that we're certainly working on and interested in. And I would say I would expect 2025 to be a big year in college athlete organizing, and I'll maybe just leave it at that for now and say it's an important conversation, but one that requires its own sort of whole discussion. The last question for the panel is a good one, which is, how can we stay updated about your efforts and continue to support your union? So why don't we go around, and if there's anything you have to say on that, if it's social media channels or specific things or actions or anything that's coming up, if there's any ways for folks who are in the audience to support you that you all want to make them aware of, please take the opportunity and do so.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us, the UFPA, and our co-founder Nick Temple, I think one of our biggest things is we want to be able to, with with the eyes and everybody, like I said, with entertainment and sports being such a big platform, I think it is super important that we all collectively, people that are doing this work, keep the doors open to conversations about how we can all support each other. I think conversations and dialogue and real relationship building is the only way we can progress kind of the collective efforts that we're all trying to do. And so I would say that, if if there's by reaching out and just reaching out to us, and us hopping on a call and just kind of talking through the specifics of what you're interested in, the specifics of what we're going through. I think that's the only way you really build anything of real substance, is by having that true connection and real dialogue about whatever the case may be. I think so that is something that personally, my doors are always open. My line is always open to talk about anything related to this. And I think that's the only way real growth happens, amongst any industry. So, yeah, feel free to reach out on, emails, any social media platforms, or anything like that. Would love to have conversations.
Chris, Angel, Amy, anything on ways to support, email, social media handles, specific things that are coming up, anything like that?
Oh,
Yeah, I
sure.
think. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So basically, if you want to support the baseball activism, there are social medias in Instagram. You can look for MLBPA. MLBPAA. You have that one. You have MLBPA, and the one in Spanish for Latin American play, more focused into Latin American players. So MLBPA International. You can look at those handles, and you are gonna find a bunch of posts about the fight against big corporations and against the fight against the MLB.
Yeah, and really just echoing what these two guys said. Our social media, MLRPA and USRPA, we have a pretty good following, and a lot of our messaging goes out through there. So if you want to amplify the message, everything goes through that. And yeah, like they said, the convos, and reaching out, and I've kind of been on this discovery. I've talked to mostly every single PA executive director throughout the last 6 months, and that's how I met Harry. That's how I'm on this panel, and you really see the network starting to grow. So like Kenneth said, just I think reaching out, trying to develop some partnerships, giving us guidance, giving us strategy is always really important, especially as we're navigating this with limited resources and kind of on our own, also while playing. So I think knowing that we have the support, reinforcing that with conversations and networking is really important.
Amy, any last word before I wrap it up and send it back to Jasmine?
We have an Instagram, NYC Coaches Collective, but we haven't been very active lately. We're gearing up for our next move. So if you follow us, you'll see it when we resurrect ourselves publicly. And just talking, I agree. The more that you talk to people in other sports, other parents, anyone, it's very helpful. And thank you so much for having us here.
So, if we were all in person, I would pause for applause right now, but since we're not, I'll just say, thank you so much to, all four of you for joining the panel, sharing your experiences, for all the important work you've done to help, workers in your workplace, and really to set an example, that can have a ripple effect beyond sports. So, I want to also thank everyone who joined tonight. I'm hoping you learned something new and interesting about the intersection of sports and labor. I really want to thank Bill and Bob Cousy, Bill Fletcher and Bob Cousy, for making time to participate in the event and share their perspectives. And finally, I want to thank very much the people who helped organize the event, Jasmine and Claire Hammonds, the Labor Center, David Foster, Josh Tolley, Brandon Withers, from the Sports Solidarity team. And in particular, I want to thank Jerry Levinsky, whose invitation to me to speak in his class was in many ways the origin of this collaboration between the Labor Center and Sports Solidarity. But Jerry's vision and hard work more than anything helped to make this event a reality. And I'm really excited that we're going to have a recording of this event that can be shared after this, because I think there was a lot of great stuff that came out of it. So thanks to Jerry and to everyone. And with that, I will kick it back to you, Jasmine, if you have any last word as we sign off here.
Okay. That was a really amazing discussion. Thank you so much for being here, to all the panelists and also everybody in the audience. Two last things. First, this is being recorded, and so we'll send that recording out after this, and you're welcome to share it with anybody you think would be interested. And second, I think, as Jerry Levinsky said in the beginning, this is a much deeper conversation. And so we really hope this is the inaugural conference and the first of many conversations to be had and to bring people together. And so we look forward to seeing all of you at our next events. Thank you so much and have a good night.